Now let's move on because we have just started. Mark's presentation was really interesting, and now we have something absolutely interesting which will catch our attention, which is very original. Has to do with innovation, and the title is Fast-Growing Technologies, Companies That Do It Well by Doing Well. This will be in streaming. Peter Wicher will be in charge of this presentation with several years of experience in Silicon Valley and product marketing. As a senior product, he worked at the vanguard of computer graphics and video, including 3D video games and high-definition companies like Microsystem. He has been a startup leader on early stages in AI, Internet of Things, and education technology. He has a very wide experience. He had done 3 corporate bankrupts, and he warns that the industry of technology is not for the heart weak. And he got a patent in the US for a design that most of us have used that was showing a presentation from your portable computer on a screen or TV. He's been a main speaker on the course of technology in the future and for programs of different national governments and global corporations. He writes about the use of fast-growing technologies to solve global challenges on his site Future Resolve, that is www.futureresolve.com. And his developments and material is very interesting. And after Peter's presentation, we will have a Q&A session by Débora Slotnisky, an Argentine journalist specialized on technology. She got several awards by different institutions like Camera Software and ADEPA, and she's the author of the book of Digital Transformation. We have the pleasure to have Débora with us here today, and she will welcome Peter. Welcome, Débora. A big applause for her, please, so as to give this first kick.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here, so thank you very much to the Córdoba Tech Cluster for to organize this relevant event for the IT industry. So, hello, Peter, how are you? You are mute, I think.
All this technology, and I just have to use it correctly. Hello, Débora. How are you?
Fine, thank you. It doesn't matter. Well, I know you study the intersection between businesses, technology, and society, so I guess you have a lot of information to share with us. So if you agree, you will have 45 minutes for your talk, and after that, we'll be opening Q&A sessions for around 15 minutes. It's okay?
That's perfect.
Great, so we'll listen to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Débora. And thank you all very much for spending your valuable time so that I can share with you my passion for business and technology and impact. My talk today is going to cover several companies that are doing very well as businesses, and they're also having a strong positive impact. We're going to look at some of the principles that they follow to achieve this wonderful dual purpose. This is the dawn of opportunity. I don't think that there has ever been a better time to start a business that will attack very large problems. The companies that we'll look at today are working on problems in energy, food, identity, climate, cybersecurity. 2 ideas that we'll see constantly that these companies are able to do is to spot major future trends and to seek billion-person impact. The first trend that I want to look at is something that I'm sure you're all quite familiar with, but it underlies all the advances that we see, and it underlies the opportunity, and that's the tremendous improvement in price and performance in computing. Mark Jackson just spoke to you about what may well be the next generation of advances in computing. But very briefly, let's look at Moore's Law. And Moore's Law was named after Gordon Moore, who was a co-founder of Intel. And in the early 1960s, Gordon Moore projected that effectively the price performance of computing, to put it in general terms, would double every 2 years. Now, Gordon Moore thought that this was going to last for about 10 years. It's lasted for almost 60. And if you do the simple math, you'll see that what we have enjoyed is a 68,000 trillion-fold improvement in the price performance of computing. That's a crazy number. I can't imagine it. And human beings actually have a hard time imagining more than a set of about 7. So I try to put it into physical world terms. Suppose we had a Moore's Law Volkswagen Beetle. Take a 1971 Volkswagen Beetle, and suppose that its price performance had increased according to Moore's Law. Well, then by the middle of the last decade, you would be able to go from Córdoba to the moon in about 45 minutes. So you could commute from Córdoba to the moon. And you could do that because it would take you less than half a liter of petrol to get there. And you would pay about 4 US cents to have that Moore's Law Volkswagen Beetle. So you can see the incredible improvement that we have had in price performance of computing, and that underlies an amazing acceleration in discoveries and the convergence of these technological discoveries. So we have had advances in big data, in digital biology, in networking and communications, in material science, I think I'll need to move here, in artificial intelligence. And here's an example of facial recognition using deep learning. Well, that same algorithms or style of algorithms are now used to solve protein folding problems that will give us wonderful new medical treatments. They're being used to do weather prediction. It's the convergence of these technologies that is so powerful. If you take artificial intelligence and sensors and networks and communications and material science and robotics, you don't get the Moore's Law Volkswagen, but you will get a completely self-driving car. The opportunities abound. Business is accelerated as well, as those of you who are in business understand. I'm sitting here, my whole career, as the introduction noted, has been in Silicon Valley. Funding is now global. We used to have something in Silicon Valley that we called the 20-minute rule. And that's where venture capitalists preferred to invest in companies that were headquartered within 20 minutes of their own office, so they could have good communication and there was good transparency. Well, that's all gone. Funding is now global. Your talent pool is global. And Mark Jackson noted the challenges in trying to find people who have the training and the ability to make advances in quantum computing. He's looking globally. And I'm sure all of you have worked remotely, have collaborated with colleagues remotely, have collaborated with colleagues, even hired people internationally in the past year and a half. Learning is global. Here I am. I'm in my house. I'm 15 miles south of San Francisco, and I'm speaking with you in Córdoba and with people in a broader global audience. That is also an example of a global customer base. So with all these opportunities, with all the tools available to us, with all the connections, all the talent that we have available to us, I think the real question is, what problem do you want to solve? And each of the companies we'll look at, you'll see that they started by saying, hey, we want to solve this big problem. One of my favorite sayings about this approach comes from my old colleague, Peter Diamandis, who's the co-founder of Singularity University. And I like this saying so much that I'll repeat it. And it is, if you want to make $1 billion, figure out how you're going to help 1 billion people. Now, before we get into these specific companies, I do want to give some advice, just 2 pieces of advice, because I've been through many startup companies, a lot of failures, a couple of successes, and I want to share with you and maybe break some myths about what it is to start a new venture. My first piece of advice: attack problems that you're really passionate about. You really have to have a fire inside you to go solve that problem. And the reason is that this is not just a job. I could tell you the stories about Christmas morning, 7:30 a.m., with my family gathered around and a major customer calling me from Asia demanding a conference call that you have to take because it's your business. I could tell stories about the 4 a.m. Conference calls. We actually built an office in my house next to our bedroom because I would be getting up in the middle of the night to go and make calls. And that's what it is. It's a lifestyle. The other reason you have to be passionate is you're going to keep getting knocked down. And when it's your business, you can't stop. You have to keep getting up. And you will have setbacks. One of my favorite athletes, Sugar Ray Leonard, says this about his own career. And I think that's very true about trying to go out and tackle these huge problems. The second piece of simple advice really comes from my own experience. I'm an engineer. I was trained as an engineer. I started out in R&D, and I love technologies. And still to this day, it's easy for me to get lost in the tech if I don't bring myself back to being a business person and focus on the needs, especially if you're going to go leveraging accelerating technologies. Say you decide to go into quantum computing. Don't get lost in the tech. A business succeeds by meeting needs, by solving problems. Focus on the needs, because I've made that mistake too many times to count. So let's dive in and let's look at a need. Here's a 1 billion person need that I think we all agree about: energy. This is the heart of industrialization and of development of economies. Looking at the major trend, we are going to need at least 50% more energy in 25 years than we have available to us today. Not only that, but another key trend is that renewables will be the fastest growing share. And renewables will be the fastest growing share, not only because of increasing concern about climate change, but also because energy is a commodity, and the most important factor in a commodity is cost. And renewables just cost less. They, especially wind and solar, they're the lowest cost form of energy. They have a huge problem, and that's storage. If the sun is not shining, or here this picture was taken, this is about an hour and a half from my home, and I'm sorry that I'm covering the headline. My state of California gets about 11% of its energy from hydropower. And we had to shut down significant pieces of hydropower last month because we're in a drought and the rivers aren't flowing as much. Storage is essential. And so here's a company, ESS, founded and headquartered in Wilsonville, Oregon. Should mention as a side note, none of the companies that I will talk about were founded in Silicon Valley, and none of them are headquartered in Silicon Valley. Innovation and this type of creativity, it is global now, as you'll see. So founded in Wilsonville, Oregon, with a very forward-looking approach. They looked at a future trend. They saw a billion-person need, and they said, we're going to deliver low-cost, environmentally friendly, high-capacity storage for utilities. And the approach they take is a type of battery called a flow battery, and they base it on iron. I won't get into the details, but it's elegant. It's iron, electrolytes, and water that can store tremendous amounts of energy. They've gone to utilities with a powerful value proposition. These are good businessmen. They see their customers' needs, and the value proposition to the owners of utilities is powerful and simple. We're going to provide you lower cost, lower emissions, and better service, more reliable, more consistent service. And it's quite successful. Here's a simple example that they use for solar companies of the importance of storage. Here is solar energy generated during the day. If you have no storage, then this energy, which is captured during the brightest parts of the day, is lost. As the sun goes down, you must use other forms, and it's typically fossil fuels that are used, typically natural gas or even diesel, to make the difference. With storage, that energy is captured, it's released during the later peak hours. Here's the demand curve, and it saves cost. It saves tremendous amounts of emissions. It just makes sense. This is a contract that ESS recently won just over in Chile, in Patagonia. They have won a deal with Grupo Saiza to provide storage for a run-of-river hydroelectric plant. And here's their value proposition. 12 years of diesel emissions will be eliminated over the 25 years of this project. And compared to other battery technologies, lithium ion being a competing technology, that's lithium ion obviously is what's used in cars, they'll save $3 million. ESS is doing extremely well. Early in their development, they had a very high quality corporate investment and very sophisticated. They were able to attract very sophisticated venture investment. Recently, they announced that they're going public with a valuation of greater than $1 billion. And this is a huge business achievement. I want to draw a clear distinction here between a unicorn and a public company, because I'm sure you've all heard of unicorns, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them now. A unicorn is a company that is private. It is still taking venture investment, and it's valued at $1 billion based on the latest venture capital that was put into it. In many ways, it's a theoretical valuation. It's a paper valuation. Going public's a different world, and I've been with a company that's gone public. It is a completely different scenario. This becomes a liquid asset. It is real money in a real market, and there are much greater real demands that the public puts on you. So this is a tremendous achievement that ESS has enjoyed. and earned. Look at another billion-person need: food and climate. We, of course, we all need to eat. We all need to breathe. There will be another 2 billion people on the planet in 25 years. How do you meet the food and climate needs for them? It's an unimaginably complex problem with so many challenges to it. As a business person, when I look at large problems and numerous large problems, I see a lot of opportunities. One of the opportunities in this massive problem is measurement. How do you measure globally the factors that go into agriculture? How do you measure soil, water, pesticide use, pests? How do you measure energy? How do you measure climate? Measurement is fundamental to improving anything. Well, one of the increasingly effective ways to do it is with satellites. And here's the first satellite. This is Sputnik. I'm sure most of you recognize it. It's about just a bit bigger than a football, a little smaller than a basketball. Sputnik launched in 1957. It took the resources of one of the greatest superpowers in world history to put this into orbit, and all it did was beep a transmission every few seconds. This is something that's followed Moore's law. The convergence of technologies, the computing, the material science, the communications, the avionics. Today, startups can launch constellations of satellites. And one of the best of these startups comes from Argentina, Satellogic. Ironically, or perhaps logically, one of Satellogic's two Argentine founders came from a 20-year history in the information technology business. He understood the explosive growth of computing and communications very well, and the convergence of technologies. He understood that very well. And he said, that's where satellites are going, and we can solve a lot of problems with that. You can see where they're located, not founded in Silicon Valley, not located in Silicon Valley. They have, so I'm sure you're familiar with the company because they have R&D right there in Córdoba, headquarters in Montevideo in Uruguay. The problem they decided to solve in measurement of the factors of agriculture and energy and climate was to measure every square foot of the earth every day. And they looked forward and they projected the trends and they said, yeah, we can do that. The benefits of being able to do this are profound. And so you can see the problems that can be solved when you can measure daily and at high precision. They went to their prospective customers, and who would be their customers? They would be major agricultural companies, insurance companies, crop insurance companies, energy companies, national governments, international organizations. And they had an elegant value proposition. We can give you very timely, accurate, and cost-effective measurement down to very precise levels. And look at the problems you can solve. Irrigation, crop health, soil and tillage, pest detection. You can do pipeline monitoring for energy companies. They can even count trees. So if you're thinking of tracking deforestation, land use, forest health, they can count individual trees. They can do fire detection in remote areas. A significant number of benefits that they offer. And because they understood the right benefits to offer, and because they executed very well, they are doing extremely well. As of June, they have 17 satellites in orbit. They announced that they are going public, and they're being sponsored by one of Wall Street's most credible and prestigious investment banks. And they too will have a real market, real money value over $1 billion. This company is doing extremely well by solving these important problems. Now, they're also kind of near and dear to my heart because we have two daughters, and one of Satellogic's traditions is naming their satellites after famous female scientists and mathematicians. So they've named satellites Mary, or Marie for Marie Curie, Hypatia for the great Alexandrian mathematician and scientist, Ada for Ada Lovelace, who was the first computer programmer. So I like this company for many, many reasons. Here's a satellite image that was not taken by Satellogic, but was taken by NASA satellite. And this was taken in October of last year of Western Argentina, right in your area. And I'm sure many of you can remember the wildfires that happened. And the red areas are wildfires, and you can see the smoke coming from these wildfires. This is where I live. And this is, we'll never forget this day. This is September 9th, 2020. This picture is not enhanced in any way. This is what it looked like at 12 noon because of wildfires that were raging about 50 miles away. Now, 8 million people live in the greater San Francisco Bay Area, and the economy of this area would be alone the 19th largest in the world. This would be a G20 economy. Argentina, also a G20 economy with wildfires as a significant problem. I believe that wildfire management is a billion-person need, and this is only getting worse. It has become literally 10x more significant, 10x worse in just the last 40 years. Well, a company has been formed out of a university incubator in Lincoln, Nebraska. This formed at the University of Nebraska, the company Drone Amplified. They decided that they were going to attack the problem of wildfires and wildfire management. And the piece of the problem they decided to address is setting prescribed burns. That is, in front of an advancing wildfire, firefighters will set a fire that they can control so that when the wildfire reaches that burned area, it's stopped. Or before fires even start, they burn out excess fuel in areas safely and under control so that wildfires will be prevented in those areas. This is a group, again, from a university incubator, and Córdoba has such marvelous universities, and it's such an entrepreneurial community. I hope that this resonates with you. What they did was a convergence of avionics and robotics and sensors and communications, material science, chemistry, and computing. They developed literally a flying robot that sets backfires. And what you have, I'll describe quickly, it's a drone with a hopper with little golf ball size spheres, and there are chemicals in the spheres. The robot injects another chemical into the sphere and lets it go. About 30 seconds later, it bursts into flames. And so you can set backfires that way. Now, if any of you have like young boys, 9 or 10-year-old boys, go home and tell them that today you learned about a drone that flies around dropping fireballs. I think they'll have fun with that concept. But this business is quite serious. This is an image from Drone Amplified's application, and here is a firefighter controlling a drone. The firefighter is able to prescribe a path for the drone. It follows it. In this case, it's going along ridges where it will set a backfire in front of. This red line is an advancing wildfire, and it also can set up boundaries for the drone. the value proposition is so crisp. Their customers are firefighting agencies, and the firefighting agencies at the top of their list of needs is keep the firefighters safe. And you can see clearly what the value proposition is. Your firefighters will be safe. We can save tremendous cost. We can cover more area. We're incredibly precise because of the communications and avionics technologies that we are using. And we can fly any time of day. We can fly in smoke, we can fly at night when all other aircraft have to be grounded. They are doing very well. They have, in just 6 years, now they have 100 units deployed in the field in 4 different countries. And when you think about it, that 100 units, it might not seem like a lot, but imagine the situation they work with. This is literally a life and death business. They are fighting horrific wildfires. And so 4 countries, 100 units out in these incredibly high stakes situations, now fully approved, is the only drone approved by the United States Forest Service. And they recently won a major contract with the United States Forest Service. It's a tremendous success. I'm going to cover 2 more needs and companies that are addressing them. Another billion-person need is identity and having authentic identity and authentic records. The World Bank shows that over 1 billion people in the world do not have proper identification. And worse than that, half of the women in developing nations lack official identity. It took me a little bit to really internalize this problem, because it's never been a problem for me. I'm quite privileged. This hasn't been an issue. But think about it. If you don't have identification, you can't get a bank account. You can't get a job. You can't get a credit card. You can't go to school. Your life is severely limited. Looking at a piece of this huge problem, academic records, there's such a great need. Many universities honestly do not trust records that come from certain areas, that come from certain schools, because of the history of potential lack of authenticity. Records, paper records especially, are easily lost, destroyed. They can be altered. Imagine if a young person in a developing nation has first had the opportunity to go to school, so his or her family has sacrificed greatly, and that young person has worked through school and gotten good grades, only to come at the end and face yet another hurdle where the records are questioned. I think all of humankind loses out on the creativity and intelligence of that young person. Blockchains are a fantastic tool for creating fully transparent, fully visible, authentic records. One of the leading companies in the blockchain world is Input Output, or IOHK. They are the co-developer and co-owner of the Cardano blockchain. Cardano is the 3rd largest blockchain after Bitcoin and Ethereum. It was released in 2017, and it was a very forward-looking development. For one, they purposely designed it to avoid the problem of energy use that persists with Bitcoin and with the original Ethereum. And they also focused not so much on a cryptocurrency, but on the problem of authentic records and authentic contracts. Last year, they struck a deal with the Ministry of Education in Ethiopia, and they are developing a blockchain tool on Cardano to keep academic records for all of Ethiopia's students. And they're starting with a rollout next year for 5 million secondary school students. The students will be able to access their records through a digital key anywhere in the world, anytime. They'll also be able to grant access to anyone at any time. And so companies who are looking to hire them, universities who are looking to admit them, will be able to see a fully transparent, unalterable, highly authentic academic record. Now, the Cardano blockchain and IOHK are doing very well. I will state up front that a large part of this valuation, of course, comes because of the current euphoria around cryptocurrencies. But the main purpose of the ADA coin, and there we go again, Ada Lovelace, back to great female scientists. The ADA coin was developed primarily to make high quality contracts and records available for billions of people. And sophisticated investors and the smart industry watchers look and say, okay, these guys are really on the right track. There is a very long-term, solid value proposition and business available here. The last thing I'll talk about is with blockchains keeping our records, our digital records, authentic and transparent. Cybersecurity is a problem that plagues everyone. How many of you have medical records online? How many of you do your banking online? How many of you do professional communication and have your professional credentials and records right there online on LinkedIn? A very good friend of mine who's a very senior executive with a global engineering firm had his LinkedIn account hacked and stolen 2 years ago. You can imagine the trauma that involves. Even the most capable internet companies get hacked. These are all recent victims of fairly high-profile hacks. And my favorite one is our own, here in the United States, our Department of Homeland Security. Now, this is the government department that is set up to protect me and my fellow citizens from foreign bad guys coming into the country and doing us harm. Well, the bad guys came into the country and they got into the Department of Homeland Security's own computer system and started causing havoc there. This problem will last forever. The criminals will always be there. And there are so many companies. This is such a vibrant area that even leading journal in cybersecurity, Cybercrime Magazine, they can't even narrow it down to a few companies. They list 150 of the top companies for 2021. The market is enormous. $1 trillion will be spent over a 4-year period. That will only grow. The amount of venture capital that has gone into fighting cybercrime just this year is enormous. $12 billion just this year invested in companies fighting cybercrime. So where do you go if you want to find a big problem to solve, to build a business around? One place, since we're coming up on the United Nations General Assembly in New York soon, is the UN's own Sustainable Development Goals. look inside these. Inside each one, you will find numerous opportunities to solve problems for 1 billion people. But as I noted earlier, it is so important to find one that you're really passionate about, because it is so hard to start a new endeavor. Find one that really speaks to you. With all the talent available, all the tools available, all the opportunities available, find something that you can build a fantastic business around that will help all of humanity. So I will stop there. I think I've used a little bit less than 45 minutes, and I love Q&A. So,
yes, we
Débora,
are here. I'm here. So, firstly, I want to know, well, thanks for talking about Satellogic, which is an Argentinian startup. But do you think in this turbulent context that we have here in Argentina, can we have a lot of Satellogic companies, or this is just one exception?
I do not think it's an exception. Now, certainly the situation, economic situation in Argentina has challenges, but the opportunity to do things outside of Silicon Valley continually becomes easier and easier, because you have access to funding on a global basis. You have access to talent on a global basis. Might it be more difficult? Perhaps. I'm not an expert in trying to start a business in Argentina. Is it possible? Is Satellogic the one and only exception? No. So it is certainly possible. And I think that it will be increasingly possible as the paradigm of working across borders, working remotely, and having global teams, global funding, global customers becomes increasingly established.
Thank you. And you said about the real question should be, what problem do you want to solve? You said in one of the first slides. So do you think that the humanity is asking the right questions, or we are losing the focus?
Let me answer with a question so that I make sure I understand your interest. When you say, is humanity asking the right questions, in which context? In an economic context, in a social context, in a business context?
Okay. Here, Germán Gazzoni from ASHI Group want to know, do you think that in the near future, could it be possible to identify people outside of government records?
Let me rephrase the question to make sure I understand. That the question is, will it be possible for there to be authentic identification that is not a government identification?
I guess so. Yes.
I haven't thought about that question, but my first thought is, yeah, sure. Now, social identities cannot be trusted because it's so easy to set up a fake social identity. But I could see an opportunity for a company or an organization to use something like a blockchain to create authentic, indelible, highly searchable records where people could put their trusted identity.
Great. Here, Agustina Perez y Carolina Salcedo have a question, and this is, what 1 billion people's problem are you passionate about?
Well, I'll speak very personally. I I am really interested, for many reasons, in the needs of persons who have cognitive disabilities, whether they are developmental disabilities or acquired disabilities. This is maybe 15% of the people in the world. And I am afraid that they are left behind and increasingly left behind through inability to access the tools that the rest of us have. I worry about cultural stigma that they face. And this is an area where I've spent quite a bit of time. So that is the first billion-person need that really comes to me.
And I think we should use artificial intelligence for these challenges, no? What do you think?
Certainly could. And these are very complex problems. But for example, I'll give you a simple example of how artificial intelligence may in fact be used already. If a person has a language disability, and so it's very difficult for them to express themselves properly, even though everything else is fine, their reasoning, their thinking, their deduction, all fine, expressing themselves. We have tools now, and I've watched young adults use these tools where when they're typing an email, they have their grammar and language automatically corrected, recommendations made. There are several pretty amazing tools for sentence completion. And so I agree with you, and I can see examples already.
Great. Here, Javier Gomez want to know, what percentage of businesses and investors are focused in doing well, for example, sustainable objectives, when doing businesses versus traditional business model?
Could you repeat the question? I want to make sure that
Yes,
that I'm properly understanding the question.
If there's increasing the number of companies that is working in doing well instead of earn money as the traditional model.
Oh, okay. You'll go out of business. So it's very, very hard. If honestly speaking, if your main focus is more charitable, then being a nonprofit is probably the better path. The examples that I gave, and what's really fascinating to me, is businesses that are run as businesses. And I look at ESS and Satellogic and Drone Amplified, and they are so good at the basics of business, of understanding value propositions, understanding customer needs, understanding how to add value. And what they have done is chosen problems that have a great social benefit, and they've built businesses around that. These are profitable, sustainable businesses, and they do it by being really good business people. And that's how they achieve the dual purpose.
Yes, earn money as a consequence of a lot of good things.
Pick the right problem, focus on the customer needs, and the two can happen.
Great. Guillermo want to know about it. You talk about focus on needs, not technology. What do you think is the best approach to find the correct needs that fit in a market? I think there's a billion need, but unfortunately, not all works like a successful business.
That's so true. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that so many startups fail is, and I've written about this. You have the wrong timing, or you've missed the cost point for a market. I'll tell you what has worked well for me, and that is, instead of having your idea and then spending time and money developing a complete solution, try to experiment very rapidly. Do a mock-up of your idea. Do a paper presentation of your idea and take it out to the potential customers for it. Invest the minimum amount of time and money needed to get a good enough example of your solution in front of the people who you think will be the customers. And they'll tell you pretty fast if you've got a good idea or if your idea is not very good.
Well, some minutes ago, you said you are passionate about working for the people with disabilities. Now, Agustina Perez y Carolina Salcedo want to know if you are working on a project about this need.
I'm not working on a product or a company right now. I am about to start doing a podcast, hosting a podcast for a company in British Columbia called ABI Wellness. And they've developed a tremendous set of therapies for people with traumatic brain injury. And so I should be starting those podcasts by the end of this year. Again, cognitive disabilities are so challenging, and there are so many amazing potential solutions, both therapies and devices that can help them. One of the companies that I love to follow is an Elon Musk company, and I've written about this company, Neuralink, a couple of times in my Future Resolve blog. Neuralink and several other companies are trying to solve the problem of actually measuring what's going on inside the brain. And it comes back to, if you want to understand something, you need to be able to measure it. They are developing very sophisticated measurement and communication systems that can be used to understand what is happening differently in the brain of a person who thinks differently, who has a cognitive impairment.
Yes, I wrote an article about Neuralink, and I interviewed some scientists about this topic, and they told me that we know nothing about the brain to improve this kind of solution. So we have to wait some years maybe to find out a good solution for
I
this
agree.
kind of people.
Oh, I agree with you fully. We have literally just seen the very tip of the iceberg. Isn't it fascinating that everything we perceive about the world happens in our brain, and we have no idea how it happens?
Well, fascinated, but dangerous, I think, because imagine that
Troubling.
all your dreams are your point of view are in a Word or in a PC, and you are hacked. So
that's I try to think positively, but yeah.
No, because you also talk about cybersecurity, and you know that cybersecurity attacks are increasing year by year. Do you think we should have to say, well, this kind of industry will be here forever, or maybe we'll find a solution against this one day?
I believe it will be here forever because criminals have been here forever. My colleague, one of my old colleagues, Mark Goodman, wrote an outstanding book on cybercrime, and he's worked for Interpol. It's called Future Crimes. And if you look at organized crime, criminals are smart. Why physically walk into a bank and rob it when you can sit in a basement somewhere outside of a country and rob it that way? I think that, unfortunately, think of athletics and drug doping, where the dopers always try to be a step ahead of the analysis tools, and it's always a game of trying to get ahead. I think that it will forever be a contest between those trying to attack our digital identity and our digital assets and those trying to protect us. I suppose the positive thing in that is, if you're a computer science student today and you want to have a very long-term career in solving big, important problems, cybersecurity is a fantastic field to go into.
Yes, and I agree with you. And of course, this kind of criminals are using also the exponential technologies, not for good, but for earn money. So
they're smart.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you very much, Peter, for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. You have been talking about a lot of topics, so thank you very much. And please, we say goodbye to you with a loud applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much.